Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I want to welcome you to the Sunday Forum for this Sunday, April the 27th. And on this Sunday Forum, we are going to celebrate someone's birthday. Well, actually, we're going to celebrate a birthday party for an event. The Council of Nicea that met 1700 years ago. It was a special event. It influenced what happened here at Emmanuel on Easter Sunday last week. I'm going to tell the whole story. I wanted to find a cake, but I couldn't find 1,700 candles. That's how special this day is. Now, why do we celebrate the Council of Nicea? Well, the Nicene Creed, of course, that we confessed this Sunday. But also some very important things happened this last Sunday, Easter Sunday. In fact, it was a record that 2 billion, I get this, 2 billion Christians celebrated Easter together on the same day this last Sunday. And that's the first time that has happened in years and years and years. Why? Because we know the Orthodox Christians in the East and in Africa have a different calendar than the Christian church, the one that we share in the West. And so often Christmas and Epiphany and Easter and Pentecost, all these celebrations happen at different times in the Orthodox world, a big world, and in the Western world. So what happened? What happened that we all came together this last Sunday on Easter and could celebrate 2 billion people together? Well, interestingly, the calendars aligned this last Easter, this last Sunday. And I think it's also important for us to mention that was St. Francis. That was our Pope Francis, his last Sunday, his last official act of the church, leading the Easter celebrations in Rome. And so we want to remember him on this day. We want to remember Catholics who have lost their leader, but also we mourn, all Christians mourn, a great leader who really stood up for the poor and was the first Latin American Pope. So before we begin this Sunday Forum and talk more about what happened Sunday, what made it so special, first of all, I want to introduce our staff as they sing happy birthday to the Council of Nicea. Take it away, staff. So here we have our staff singing happy birthday to the Council of Nicea.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Council of Nicea. Happy birthday to you.
Lovely. So that's quite a talented group, isn't it? Now, in my family, after we sing happy birthday, we have a second verse. We sing, and how old are you? How old are you? And for the Council of Nicea, that's clear. It's 1,700 years old. They met in 325 AD. We don't know if they met in May and June. So actually, the birth month was next month in May or in June. But secondly, 1,700 years old, that's really quite a tradition. And what had happened was Constantine became the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, and he's the first one who was a Christian. And different Christian groups had been meeting all over the place and had different doctrines and actually different practices of when to celebrate Easter. That's right, different days for Easter. And so Constantine came together, brought over 250 bishops into what's presently Turkey, into Nicaea. And he said, I want you to agree on all the doctrines and on some of the practices of the faith. And so one of the things, we have the Nicene Creed, at least the first version was finished in 325, where we get formulations like one being with the Father and that Jesus was true God and true man. That came from Nicaea. Secondly, we have the famous event where St. Nicholas slaps Arius as a heretic because Arius did not believe that Jesus was begotten from the Father. He said Jesus was created. Jesus wasn't God himself. And that's when St. Nicholas slapped him. And third, we'll mention that because we just celebrated Easter. They agreed to celebrate Easter on the same day. That had not happened for the first 300 years of Christendom. And so they determined the date, set it down, and you'd think that's where the story would end. No, buckle up, the story is much more complex than that. It was actually very hard to agree on one day to celebrate Easter. Now, why is that? So they had a date. They knew when the Passover took place on the 14th of Nisan. That's a lunar calendar date. Well, most of us don't use the lunar calendar. And the bishop said, well, we don't want to celebrate on 14 Nisan because that might be on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, whenever the full moon arrives after the spring equinox, we want to celebrate Easter on the first day of the week on a Sunday. So there's your first problem. So they agree on the first Sunday after the spring equinox, the full moon. Now, here's where the second problem comes. They had used the Julian calendar to mark that date, that Sunday. The Julian calendar comes from Julius Caesar. But unfortunately, the Julian calendar has a slight problem of a few minutes every year, and you start adding those up. And by 1582, the calendar was off. Pope Gregory the 13th realized this. He says, okay, we've got to fix the calendar and align it with how the planets actually circle around the sun. And so he moved in 1582. It was October the 4th. He said, no longer is it October the 4th. It's October now the 15th. He moved the calendar up. Kind of a great, glorious version of our leap year, which tries to do the same thing, to adjust the calendar to the movements of the stars and the planets and the sun. Now, once he moved the calendar, only countries in the West agreed to the new calendar, the Gregorian calendar, where many churches in the East, the Orthodox churches, stayed, at least for the celebration of Easter, with the Julian calendar. And so today and up until last Sunday, often the calendars were off by 10, 12, 13, even 14 days. But this last Easter, the calendars aligned, and all of Christendom, 2 billion people, came together and celebrated on Easter. And how wonderful it is that Pope Francis, his last official act was to lead that worship in the West, as the bishops were also leading that worship in the East on the same day, which was the fruit of the Council of Nicea. So once again, we want to get a shout out. Happy birthday to the Council of Nicea, 325 AD. They established a lot of the doctrines of the church, but they also really desired that all Christians would come together in Easter and celebrate on the same date. And the fruit of their labors, 1700 years ago, came to fruition last week. And we at Emmanuel were a part of it, celebrating with 2 billion other Christians that Jesus is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Thank you, Pope Francis. Thank you, Council of Nicea. Happy birthday. Thanks for joining us on the Sunday Forum. Bye-bye now.